Hey guys, welcome to Axle Deep, a podcast where we go axle deep on random topics each week. Today, it's me and Derek talking about our cars.
Yeah, I'm excited. I have not had a trip down memory lane about my cars, and wow, this ice is terrible. In a really long time. Like the whole
Yeah,
road's ice. This is crazy. Like I mean, we literally just went through some really big snowstorms. Probably the first real snowstorms that we've had in Michigan since two of us have lived here, and it was not anything like this.
yeah, not this crazy.
I mean, and granted, I suppose I've never been to Alaska in the winter, so maybe just solid like I mean it looks like glass.
But you have the
I'm glad I
chains
put on
on your
chain.
car?
Yeah, and I'm already having like it was already just like super weird and slick. Um yeah, I mean that's my car history, well I guess both of our car histories, right, starts in Florida. So I've
Mm-hmm.
never had to mess with chains. I don't even know really what chains are like. You know?
I've driven with my chains on one time in my life, and I kind of regretted it.
Was that on your Scion?
It was on my Scion at like 5 o'clock in the morning coming home from a board game convention to Heber over Parley's.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, by then I just had all-wheel drive. So I mean, like, I guess let's start. I'll start off with my first vehicle, which I think was really applicable to what we're doing in SnowRunner. My first car that I had was the family tow car, because we had a car for towing. It was a 1989 Jeep Grand Wagoneer that was super awesome. I did not know how awesome it was until like a decade later. But man, that thing was cool. It was full power, leather trimmed interior. It had just, I mean, it was loaded. I guess those cars were super luxury cars when they came out. And they were not when we got it. We got it like, fifth owner or something like that. But it was a
What
cool
year were
car.
you born again?
I was born in '89, so the car was the same age as I was, and it is still possibly the nicest car I've ever owned. Arguably, it was nicer than my Outback. I
His
would,
Outback's
I'd
pretty
be
nice.
willing. My Outback is pretty nice. I guess it's probably comparable to my Outback, but my Outback is a 2008. So, but from there, I sold that, and it was a gas guzzler. That was a big part of getting rid of it. It was old, so my parents wanted me to sell it, and I got a Cavalier. Do you remember the Cavalier?
I do remember the Cavalier. You didn't have that for a very long time, though.
No, I had it for less than 3 months because it blew two pistons. Shortly after buying it, we bought it for $1,500 or something really cheap like that, and it had like junkyard writing on the valve cover. My grandfathers were mechanics, right? So my dad had done a lot of junkyard pulling engines and stuff like that. And he was like, I don't think that's a big deal. It's probably just a valve cover. I think it probably was a big deal in retrospect. Oh, do you just want to go grab that other tower right there?
Yeah,
That way
because
you're going.
I got blocked off by a pipeline.
Oh, interesting. All right. Well, I'm just going
Yeah.
to keep going forward. Um, I think the timing was off on it. The timing chain was off because I kept complaining about this weird noise, and then one day driving down the road, it just stopped working. We towed it to a mechanic, and the mechanic said that it would need a new engine. It'd be like $4,000, which was way cheaper than the engine in my Outback. And my parents were just like, "No, there's no way." So then I drove family cars for a while, and I think in that time, I mean, you got your first car before me, right? I mean, you're older than I am by a few years,
Yeah,
so
I got my first car when I was 16.
okay.
So, ironically, my car also was older than I was, my first car. I had a Subaru GL. It was a 1986. And that thing was
The thing was
awesome.
cool.
Yeah.
It
If
was
it
super
hadn't been
cool.
nickel and
It was
diming me,
nasty when you got it.
it was gross when I got it. Like, a husky lived in it like lived in it.
Didn't it have fleas when you got it? Didn't you guys have to like de-lice it and stuff?
I think it did have fleas. Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was gross.
pretty
I mean, but it
gnarly.
cleaned up really well. It was a cool car.
Yeah, it was a super cool car. It was super fun.
Wagon. For
Yeah, it
those who
was a
don't know
blue
what a
wagon.
Subaru GL is, because they're old, it's like the predecessor to a Subaru Outback.
It was the Subaru Outback before the Subaru Outback was a thing. It was a 5-speed
Yeah.
manual. I've only owned one automatic transmission vehicle in my life. To be fair, I've only owned 3 vehicles in my life. And, well, no. This is my 4th. My current car is my 4th vehicle. And 3 out of the 4
Yeah.
have been
Yep, that
manuals.
makes sense.
The Subaru
Yeah.
GL, man, it was great, but it had this weird idle problem where it would idle at like 2,000 RPMs, and it was because like the throttle cable didn't return properly, and so we just got rid of it eventually because it was nickeling and diming us. It cost us money all the time, and so my parents.
Is that what
were
happened
like,
to it? I don't really remember like the death of that. I just remember you getting a new car.
It didn't die. We traded it in. For
Okay, for the Scion.
Yeah, so we traded it in for the Scion, and we got the Scion. It was an 06 Scion. I got it for graduation present for high school. My parents said, "This is your graduation present for high school and for college. So you have to graduate college." The Scion was great.
I mean, pretty good considering it was brand new, you know?
Yeah, it had 35 miles on it when I bought it. And I put
That's crazy.
298,000 miles. So,
Yeah.
297,965 miles on it. Or whatever.
So, a quick question for you. Should we bounce back and forth through chronological order, or do you want to tell the tale of the Scion through the death?
I think we should bounce back and forth through chronological order.
Okay. So yeah, so you got your Scion. That was what, 2006? Because you graduated in 06, right?
Yeah, I graduated in 06.
We're
I got it
gonna
in,
date
February
ourselves.
2006.
We're gonna date ourselves really hard throughout this.
Oh yeah.
But okay, so you graduated in 06, and then you got that. I remember you test drove a Mazda Protege, and every time I see one, especially a yellow one, I think about that.
A Mazda P5. I wanted that so bad. That was the car that I wanted. But it just wasn't in the cards.
Yeah. Well, and then because you had, I mean, I realized that both of our first cars were technically wagons. I guess mine was an SUV. You've always been into wagons and hatchbacks.
Oh yeah.
I didn't start getting into them until recently. Yeah, no, I was a big sedan fan. I like tiny cars. I still like tiny cars. But I guess that's also like I learned to drive in my dad's pickup truck, which probably has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
You know, and that was so when you were getting the Scion, I think at that point I was still driving my dad's pickup truck around. I'd drive it to work and stuff like that. My dad had a company car, right? But I didn't have to worry as much about it. But the truck was, I mean, it was just a basic Dodge Ram, right? 1500. Drove it to work, drove it around, things like that. And this is cool. This like gas station's like this tiny little gas company, like ramshackle place. I don't know. It seems like something you would see in the middle of nowhere in Alaska.
Yeah.
Okay, so after driving that for a while, I think my parents just kind of got tired of. So I sold the Jeep, and that was like a big thing. Was that I set the asking price, and I had communication with all the buyers and all that sort of stuff. But my parents are the ones who wanted me to sell it, and I sold it for like $3,000, and then we bought me a $1,500 car, which I was definitely salty about. The $1,500 car blew up 2 months later, and then eventually my parents got tired of that, and they were going to And to be fair, I've never bought my own car. Um, Technically, my parents paid for the car that I have now, even, which is awesome, like super great for me. But they decided they were going to get me another car, and I wanted something super reliable and super good on gas. And
Yeah.
so we looked all over, and I wanted a manual. My mom had gotten, I somehow convinced my mom, I think you helped, uh, convinced my mom to get the Beetle, right? A
Mhm.
manual 2004, 2005 Volkswagen Beetle. So I was dead set on getting a manual, and we drove like 2.5 hours, which is the beginning of me doing stupid stuff to get cars. Drove like 2.5 hours down to Port St. Lucie or something to get a 120,000 mile manual Honda Civic, a 1999, and I got that in '07. Then I put 150,000 miles on it. When it died, it had 270-ish, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was, I guess at that point, now the chronological order gets confusing. Who's first? um, I had that car for a while, right? Like I had the Civic for, I guess, almost as long as you had the Scion. You had your Scion longer. Oh, that's the river. That's the river. That's the river.
I mean, yeah, I think they were about the same because I got mine in '06. When did you get your Civic?
It was like January or February '07 because I graduated in '07 and I got it halfway through my senior year.
Okay. Cool. Um, yeah, so I had the Scion next after the Subaru GL. Subaru GL was awesome. It had four-wheel drive. It didn't have all-wheel drive. So it was before Subarus were all-wheel drive. So it had a selector in it. And that was super fun. I taught a lot of my friends how to drive stick in it because the clutch was slipping so bad that it was almost impossible to stall it, which was really fun too. But then the Scion, yeah, I got the Scion. You know, I wanted a manual. The Scion came in a manual. The Scion was actually really kind of inexpensive. And
Oh yeah, they're super inexpensive, but like good.
yeah, good inexpensive. I mean, it lasted me 300,000 miles, and I literally changed the alternator and one of the pulleys on the belt system, and that was it. Other than like belts and oils and that jazz.
And for anyone who doesn't know, a Scion is literally a Toyota. It was only made in America because they just made Scion to try to cater to the American market. And
No, the
so
Scion,
your car was...
You could get that car in Japan. It was just a Toyota.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You
Yeah.
know, it's like the Scion badging only existed in America, but the
Correct.
cars didn't. But like your car was basically, and the one even in Japan, it's like the same as the P160. I can't remember. It's the same Corolla that my friend Becky has, which is like they made until like 2004 to 2009. Like same engine, same everything, just a different body. You know,
Yep.
which is cool. I mean, that's why it's super reliable. That's why yours lasted so long. And realistically, like we were planning to keep it longer.
Oh yeah. If we hadn't moved to Michigan, we would have rebuilt the engine because basically it got to the point where the head gasket had blown. So.
Yeah, which at 300,000 is really not bad. And on top of that, I mean, you had how many states did you driven it through?
Oh God, I mean, I've driven it all the way up the East Coast. I've driven it all over.
Yeah,
I can't even count because it's been California to New York to Florida to Texas. It's been everywhere.
yeah. So I mean, you made it coast to coast and border to border, didn't you?
Yeah. I don't know if I ever got very close to Canada, but like it's definitely come up to Michigan.
Yep.
I mean, heck, within like a year span, I drove it across the country like 3 times because I drove it out to Utah, then I drove it back to Michigan, and then I drove it back out to Utah. So that thing, I mean, it drove everywhere. I drove the piss out of that thing, and I was never kind to it. Like, I drove it off road in Moab in like the gnarliest. Everyone's like, "Oh, these are Jeep trails. You'll never make it." And I'm like, "Yeah, watch this." Never got it.
Yeah, that's very much. It's very much how I felt about my Civic too, because I did a lot of that same sort of stuff, especially like out on the Jeep roads. Is that you? That is you. I don't know why else another car would be driving by on my screen.
Where are you?
I'm up the hill doing there was a stuck pickup truck up here.
Oh, okay.
So I'm winching it down the hill. Yeah, I mean that was a big thing. Was like, so my Civic never made it coast to coast, or never made it border to border, but it did make it coast to coast. And like, I mean, that's kind of loosely saying that. You know, I went to Bend, Oregon, but that's close enough in my opinion.
I mean, you're 2 hours from the coast, so pretty much.
I guess. I don't know. There was a mountain in my way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, so in that time, I had the Civic, right, and I drove.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it.
Oh no, you go.
Okay. The Civic I had in that time frame, right, and it was same sort of thing. Like the Civic had been really well maintained, and because of that, I was able to just beat the piss out of it. I replaced a bunch of stuff on it, but nothing ever broke on it. The only thing that happened was the Civic had a distributor, and eventually the rotor wore out, and I didn't really understand what that was at the time. So that happened, and then one time I thought I blew the water pump, and I towed it to a mechanic, and they replaced a hose for $12 is what they charged me. And I went and picked it up later that afternoon, so that was really cool. And then one time the water pump actually did blow, and it just exploded coolant all over the place. And then that was kind of the start of the death of it. I'm pretty sure the water pump was, in retrospect, I think the water pump was fine, but I think the head gasket was already blown. And it was pressurizing the water system, the coolant system, and so it was just like, I mean, we started going through everything. So there was either the lock was like clogged up in the coolant passageways, or the head gasket was blown. So more likely the head gasket was blown. No, but that was also at 265. Oh yeah. I mean, that was in 2019, and then even with the head gasket blown, I then drove it to Bend, Oregon, and then I gave it to a friend, and then my friend had it for a few months. She needed something slightly more reliable than her what did you have? Chevy Cobalt. Yeah. Her Chevy Cobalt, even though the Chevy Cobalt had half the mileage on it, and then it got hit by a driver. It was street parked, and this person just demolished it. I don't even know. I can't explain how bad it was. The best thing that I can say is that the rear seats had been pushed into the front seats. It had been hit so hard. Luckily, that person, survived, and no one was in the car. But that was the official death of the Civic, which was about a year after I got my Outback.
We should talk about some of the fun and stupid things we did the Civic and the Scion. Because, like, I towed a sailboat with my Scion.
I forgot that. I forgot you owned a sailboat.
Yeah,
in North Carolina.
There was a period in my life where I owned a sailboat. It was a small 2-man sailboat. But I towed it with the Scion. I was like, I got a hitch on this. It'll work. I got the sailboat for like $700, and it's a sailboat that you could probably lift with like 3 people. So It's not that heavy, but yeah, that was a fun experience. I don't recommend towing anything with a Scion, because even that was too much. So yeah,
I mean, I feel like at this point I've become the king of towing stupid stuff. And yeah, generally, if you probably shouldn't tow anything with a small vehicle, even if you can. Realistically.
Well, I think the Scion had a max weight of like 800 pounds, and I've weighed 220 since
So
like sixth grade. You've weighed close to 200. Like between you and me,
Yeah.
we're 400 pounds. We put anything in that car with us, and we definitely put 5 people in that car multiple times. Definitely had it packed with cargo. I've moved multiple times with that car. The amount of stuff that I've put in
Bed
that
on the
car
roof.
is insane. What was that?
Oh, I said bed on the roof. The
I
one
drove
that
a
blows my mind.
queen-size bed with a bed on with a.
That's nothing compared to a couch, though. Like anyone can strap a queen size bed to the roof of a car. Anyone can do that to any vehicle, but not anyone can shove a couch, a full size couch, into the back of their little econo box and drive it. You know, I mean, we took a couch. We took a couch to across Salt Lake City, didn't we? I'm sure you've taken couches further.
I don't know what the farthest I've taken a couch, but like I would take a couch to we had a tradition in our college where we would take couches to the soccer games to watch the soccer games, and so I would take a couch every soccer game in the back of my Scion back and forth from the college down to the soccer field. It was like 3 or 4 miles away. So yeah, that was fun. The other kind of crazy thing I did to the Scion was I ended up building a bed platform in it.
Yeah.
And that was right before it died, though, so I never actually got to sleep on it. Because the one night I was going to, it was actually really nice weather. It was supposed to snow, but it ended up being really nice, so we slept in the tent.
Yeah. Oh, so and I also want to bring up the point that this is the first generation Scion XB, which is the smaller of the two. Because I don't understand how you fit in that, sleeping in that. I mean, I barely fit in my Outback.
When I had the platform in there, basically if you slid the passenger seat all the way forward and then tilted it all the way forward, I could sleep in the back. And it wasn't that bad.
Okay. I mean, I guess the small so one time, you, me, and our friend Johnny went to the beach in my Civic, and all 3 of us slept in a parking lot in my Civic. So you know, I suppose one person in the back of a Scion is relatively reasonable.
We had the bright idea to go camp on the beach with just beach towels, and it got cold.
I'm pretty sure that was like me insisting on that, and it was a terrible idea. It was a terrible idea. Because they started cleaning the beach.
Yeah.
Remember, they had those like giant orange things that came out at like 4 in the morning, and were just zipping all over the place, flashing lights, picking up the trash cans. Which I mean is like, you know, that's like pretty dope that, you know, they're out there like cleaning the beach. But and that was not an experience I would like to repeat.
I agree.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That was so what?
Truck.
Oh, a new truck. Is it?
It's like really stuck in the woods.
Ooh, interesting. Wonder if I can come over and look at it. Stop engine. Where are you?
Let me see if we can. Yep, you can get it.
I can just pour it into it. Oh wait, what did you get? The Royal?
Mm-hmm.
What's the White Western Star? Oh, that's what you were driving around.
That's what I'm in, yeah.
Look at that. Oh man, it's like in there. And you think I can just drive it out of here?
Or you could just recover.
Oh, the engine. Oh. I just broke it. It's like the engine is stalling, and I just was like mashing on the gas, and then it broke. Interesting. I wonder what the heck this thing is.
Hey, Kat, I know we're normally on Sunday, but we were making too much money doing the Super Bowl on Sunday, so we're recording late.
Yeah. Yeah, very late.
So yeah, throwback to our last week's episode of talking about DoorDash. We definitely got the hustle on Sunday, and we made almost $30 an hour for about 6 hours straight, which was pretty dope.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very dope. It was a very good single shift.
Yeah. So what other crazy things did you do in your Civic, like modifications?
So I ended up I like cars a lot now. I didn't until like 2 years ago, right? So the Civic was relatively tame, I would say. I got an eBay short ram intake on it that actually I was working at a restaurant, and the manager of the restaurant was clearly having his midlife crisis, and maybe always will be. He really wanted me to get an Integra, which I kind of wish I had, like in retrospect. But the Integra got a lot less gas mileage because it has a much cooler engine. So he was trying to get me to get an Integra, and then when I got the Civic, he actually bought me an eBay short ram intake. And so I had a little short ram intake in there for a while, which I actually thought sounded awesome. Then eventually, the muffler rusted out, and then it was all super loud. So I ended up putting the stock airbox back in. I put new struts on all four corners at one point. I put it into a guardrail at about 35 miles an hour, which definitely should have been the death of it. But because of, and this is probably honestly the craziest thing that ever happened with a Civic, my dad had a friend who owned a body shop, and we basically took it to his body shop, and it had frame damage on it, right? And we just pulled the frame rail mostly straight, like we eyeballed it. Since then, I've worked as an auto damage adjuster in body shops and understand how complex straightening a frame rail is, and we did not do it right at all, like not even close, right? But hey, it worked, and that was that was probably in like 2010, right?
Yeah, that was pretty early in the life of that car.
Yeah, I mean, considering how long that car went, yeah, that should have killed it. That was like $4,000 worth of damage. I think we ended up $4,000 out of pocket, just mostly on parts. It did the frame rail. It had to get a new radiator support, new headlight. I drilled out all of the spot welds on the radiator support. New hood, new fender, and I did a lot of the like prep work for it, which is also why all the paint peeled off. That was a big part of it. And then kind of after that, I did a sound system, which of course was stolen out of it because it's a Civic. And then I replaced the amp, which was also at some other point stolen because it's a Civic. That car got broken into about once a year is what it ended up averaging out to be. And a lot of the times were really minor, but I had an aftermarket radio in it because it's a Civic. And people kept trying to break in and steal the radio, but couldn't because I guess they're bad thieves. And so, it just like started getting more and more busted up. And around 200,000 miles is when I kind of just didn't really care as much about keeping it nice and pretty. And so I ended up moving to Utah with 2 bikes on the roof and everything I owned in the back of it, which was a terrible idea. But I did it. I made it. I lost control in Colorado in a snowstorm twice.
Because that was your first time ever driving in snow.
First time ever driving in snow. Ooh, I found a Jeep or something. I found something. It looks like I think it's the Scout. I think it's what you have. Can I change vehicles? First time ever driving in snow. Was, oh man, this thing's like set up too. Oh, is this your car? This is your car.
Oh yeah, that is mine.
Of course. I was all excited. So yeah, that was my first time driving.
Build this bridge that you're at.
Oh, is that why you went and got the?
Mm-hmm.
I saw your car sitting over here and thought maybe there was stuff on this side, and that's why I came over here.
Yep, I was building us a
Sweet.
bridge.
Like it.
You did some cool stuff though. You cosmetically you did
the roof
headliner.
headliner. There we go. Thank you. That was definitely the coolest thing I did, I think. That or the roof rack. I liked the roof rack because I had drilled it into the roof, so it was a permanently installed roof rack, which never leaked in like
That's pretty dope.
10 years of that. Yeah. But I did a custom headliner and sun visors and things like that with a green and black plaid. I say that I have never really been into cars, and then I start listing off all these things that I did to my Civic. So maybe I was.
It primed you.
Yeah. No, it absolutely did, but that's also kind of the like early history of me and cars is my dad, one of my grandfathers used to rebuild Camaros. And then my dad had his Jeep when I was real young. So cars have kind of run in the family,
Oh, by the way, you should accept all the contracts if you haven't.
Oh my God, that's the thing. I forget that that's the thing. They're all new contracts. Okay. Yeah, so that's the indirect route of all of the various things that I did to the Civic. I mean, that really is most of them. And then just stupid things. I was not gentle to it, it was a manual car, and I would go out to Moab, and I really would go like 40 back on the back roads, and just like the Civic, by the time it made it to Utah, was only about 2 inches off the ground, just because everything was so worn out. And it's not a good place to desert is not a good place to do 40 miles an hour in a 2-inch tall Civic. But I did it, and it survived.
Yep.
What's the craziest thing that you ever did in your Scion?
I mean, there were some camping trips down in like Goblin Valley.
Yeah.
You're 2 hours from the nearest gas station. You're 2 hours from the nearest civilization. There's almost no cell phone service. And we were like, we'll just go down this road and get a primitive camping site. And we did. And I've gone farther since the first time. And that road is pretty gnarly. And like most of these people you see out there in these like RAV4s with the rooftop tents and these big trucks, and then everybody sees like me driving down with this little Scion, and they all give you this side look, and you just keep going farther and deeper than them. And,
you're probably passing them. They're probably passing them, and they're just thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna have to pull you out later."
Well,
did you ever get stuck?
Never got stuck in the Scion. I never got stuck that I wasn't able to just like push it out myself. And that's snow, that's dirt, mud, anything like that. I used to drive the piss out of that in the snow and like be going faster than all the Subarus, all the all-wheel drive vehicles. Never had a problem with that.
I mean, honestly, I still am pretty insistent that my Civic being super lightweight was actually more confidence inspiring in the snow than my Outback on snow tires. Mainly just because the Outback weighs 1,000 pounds more, and like I never had problems accelerating in the Civic, but I do sometimes have problems stopping in the Outback.
Yeah.
Right? And that was the other thing with it too, is the Civic never got stuck. So it wasn't an issue, like why do I care if like I didn't need the ground clearance. I didn't need all those things, which I love having in the Outback. Don't misunderstand me. But the Civic just kept going. The only time I ever actually had it get stuck was in there was a night that it snowed 8 inches, and I didn't want to plow the driveway.
Yeah.
Or shovel the driveway. So I was just like, forget it. We'll just go. And it did get stuck in 8 inches of snow, which I think seems, pretty obvious, right?
One of the
When you say
craziest
it.
experiences in my Scion that I ever had was actually I was going. Oh shoot! I think I took the wrong turn. Oh no, I'm going the right way. I took.
What are you working on?
The contract pipeline construction.
Oh, you're already doing that?
Yeah, because I'm.
Are you near
there with a truck that can pick up service parts?
Okay, I was saying because I just pulled a truck out to pick up service parts.
You should do one of the other ones that we unlocked that needs stuff, I think.
Oh Jesus! There were no other contracts.
No, there's a couple tasks I unlocked.
Okay, cool. I'll take a look at them. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no. So, driving in my Scion, it was me and my friend Megan. We were going to our friend Ben's wedding in West Virginia. And it was raining and it was dark and I probably didn't have good tires. And we were going around one of these like really tight clover leaf on-ramps onto the... And my car was just sideways. But it was fine because I know how to drive. And my friend Megan, like, once we got on the highway, she looked at me and she's like, were we just sideways? I was like, yeah. Yeah, we were. And, yeah.
That's awesome.
The amount of times I got that Scion sideways, I regret not rallycrossing it. That is my biggest regret with the Scion.
Yeah.
Listening to my roommate when I first moved out there.
Would have been
He was
really
like,
cool.
"Oh no, you can't do that with that car," and he's wrong. He's wrong. I could have absolutely rallycrossed it.
Oh, absolutely. Especially the at the Utah course. I don't think there was anything concerning at the Utah course.
No.
As far as your Scion goes.
And anything that it would have done, my car probably had already screwed up like that. So, because my bumpers were all torn up because of the stupid curbs in Utah, and they don't know how to make transitions.
The drainage culverts.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, those were crazy. Yeah. No, absolutely.
So yeah, and then
did you ever have winter tires?
Never had winter tires. Only ever had all seasons. The only car I've ever crashed had winter tires on it in the winter. So the winter tires really they're bad luck. They're bad luck.
I mean, you say that, but I know you want winter tires on your new car.
I do. I mean, I haven't seen a need for them.
I've heard you make multiple explanations about winter tires having helped in a certain situation. Not in a way that like would have been a life or death or anything like that, but I never had winter tires on my Civic either, but I still do feel better having them on my Outback.
Winter tires absolutely make a difference, and I would have them if I had the money for them.
Yeah. No, I get
Especially
that.
since the winter tires are probably worth more than the car.
I mean, the car's worth technically $2,000, right?
I mean, that's what I paid for it, so that's what it's worth. So yeah, let's talk about, we had our kind of high school life cars that lasted us both about 10 years. I mean, mine lasted me 13 years and 300,000 miles. And yours lasted you, 12 years and almost 300,000 miles? Or you put like 150 on it?
Something like that. I put 150 on it just because I didn't make as many cross-country trips as you did. Yeah, I only moved across the country. I've only moved across the country twice instead of God knows how many times.
Well, and when I was in college in North Carolina, I probably came home once a month. And that was a 600-mile drive each time. So...
Yeah, the Civic only went to North Carolina a couple of times.
But I mean, honestly, I still,
even after
college, averaged about 30,000 miles a year on that car.
Yeah, and I did not. But I mean, they still. Oh, I've been promoted. Look at that. Oh, because you completed the pipeline.
Can you put chains on now?
I have chains on the pickup truck. but I am not. I'm ranked 12, not 14.
Gotcha.
So I cannot put chains on the Fleet Star, which is apparently what I'm driving to the other side of the map.
Oh, now you can accept a bunch more contracts.
Oh, sweet. All right.
Yeah, so those
Um,
cars lasted us a pretty long time, and they were great cars, and we both loved them. I loved my
Yeah.
Scion. So I may have wrecked my car that I had after the Scion, and the first thing I looked up was Scions, because why not?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why is this being done? Okay, I have that one. I loved the Civic, and I kind of wish I really like the BMW, but I kind of wish we had just done the Civic. I felt like the Civic was not going to be capable enough to be worth the money of rebuilding. But I think a lot of things in rally and rallycross have shown me that that is not the case. Specifically at Rally Colorado, the '98 silver Honda Civic, which is exactly what I had, um, like just mobbing down stage roads. I remember seeing that thing going and just being like, oh, I messed up. Because the Civic is so cheap. I mean, even an E30 is very cheap compared to a Subaru. Um, but the Civic was just crazy cheap. Everything about it was cheap and easy to deal with, and there's a lot of support out there. And really, I just wanted like a more of a sports car. I've just had like a 7-year midlife crisis at this point,
Yep.
Um, but that was a big thing. Part of the reason I got rid of the Civic is because I wanted a little bit more space. The Civic was dying and starting to take a lot of money, and I didn't think it was worth putting a new engine in. But yeah, I wanted more space and I wanted something sporty, and so I got the Outback. Which I realize doesn't sound like I got something sporty. I flew across the country to buy a turbo Outback with a manual transmission. I flew from Utah to North Carolina to buy a very specific Outback, a 2008, because I wanted a 2008 or a 2009, because of I have really really tiny arms, and I needed an extendable. I really wanted an extendable steering rack.
Is that really why you bought the 2008?
Yes, absolutely. In 2008, with the facelift, they introduced a adjustable, like an extendable steering rack, and it was a mixture of things. I wanted a Legacy GT wagon, not a Outback. The Legacy GT wagon's a few inches shorter, right? So it looks a little sportier. I think the lines on it are a little bit cleaner. And I don't
Okay.
know, like it just I didn't want an SUV, right? I wanted a wagon. But they only made the Legacy wagon in America for 2 years, and they made the Outback for 5. And then when I started looking around, I realized that if I got an '08 or an '09, I could get what I thought is the better looking front end, and and I could get an adjustable steering column, so I could reach the friggin' steering wheel, uh, which is kind of important, right?
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, it's got a manual, it's got a turbo. It's basically a like slightly underpowered WRX, with a longer body. It's not even that much heavier of a body. So I mean, it really is. I really did go the sports car route because I thought I had a job that would support a midlife crisis, And then the engine blew up 900 miles later. I bought it 2 days later. On the drive back, I decided I was going to drive it back to Utah, and it blew up in Kansas. And I don't actually know what blew up on it yet, but one of these days I'll pull apart the old engine, which I still have. So I ended up towing it back to Utah. Took a Greyhound back to Utah from Kansas, which was definitely an experience that I don't. I feel like I'm better off for having done it, but I don't want to do it again. And then I decided to buy all of the possible tools that I would need to pull the engine out of the Outback, and I put a new short block in it. And so I basically am, I don't know, like 10K into the engine, basically. Like between the engine, turbo rebuild, new clutch, all new wear parts, um, and then the various like mods and stuff that I have sitting around for it, the Outback will end up getting just I could spend an hour talking about specifically just things that I want to put onto the Outback, and I've
Yeah,
got
for
another
sure.
car sitting in the parking lot on top of that.
The crazy thing
Yeah,
is in 2019, you and I both were in like a financial position where we could be like, oh, let's get new cars. And so
yeah,
we did. And so my
yes.
Scion died literally as I was pulling into the Ford dealer to buy a Ford Transit Connect. Ford Transit Connect's like the mini transit van, so the mini Sprinter, basically. It's the Ford version. It's a really cool little van. I had these plans of building a little camper in the back of it. I was all into the hashtag van life, and that was what I wanted to do. And I was like, you know what? I can afford a car payment right now. I'm going to have a good job. And so I bought a van. and, and I love that van. I mean, I put 35,000 miles on it in my first year of owning it. I drove it all
It
over
was
the
a cool
place.
van.
Yeah, I love the van. I raced the van. You can actually, if you're watching, you can see that I'm wearing a Rally Van t-shirt. And that comes from when I raced it at a rallycross because the BMW broke when we showed up to the rallycross. So I was like, well, I paid. I'm going to keep racing.
It broke before we left for the Rallycross. Like, let's be honest. I just kept driving it
Yeah.
anyway.
So yeah, so I had the van, and that was super fun. It was great to sleep in. That was why I bought it. I wanted to. I want a vehicle that I could sleep in and go anywhere with, and so that's the one that I came on, and it was. At the end of the day, I got used car salesman when I bought it. There was a few things that were worse off than the guy had sold me, but for the most part, it was pretty good van. I mean, nothing ever
Yeah.
happened to me, and I enjoyed driving it until I decided to kill it. So,
Yeah, that was, I think it's funny. We kind of bought, when we bought our new cars, we kind of wanted the same thing out of our cars. Like, I wanted more on the sporty side, right? Because I'm pretentious, I guess, and because I'm having a midlife crisis. But I wanted an all-wheel drive wagon was really what I wanted, and I really wanted a manual, which is why I ended up in the Outback. And it's because I wanted to be able to get up to the ski resorts. I wanted to be able to go off-road in Moab, and I wanted to be able to sleep in it,
mhm.
which I like mostly can. I mean, I've slept like 6 days in the Outback so far, and I'm planning to make it better for sleeping. But I also wanted something that was really, really fun to drive, and I would say that my Outback is of its year is faster than the average car from 2008. Cars have been getting faster, so it's a little bit different. It doesn't quite keep up with a Mustang, but it is also a wagon. You know.
It is very solidly a soccer mom car,
Oh
but
yeah,
in like the
absolutely.
coolest way possible. So, I think that was a great car. I think you got a good car. I'm kind of jealous of it.
Yeah. Well, and I had the same sort of thing. I didn't get necessarily used car salesman. I bought it from a private party, but there were definitely things about it that were wrong with it. It would have been a terrible car had my parents not bought it for me. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
That car would have been an absolute nightmare. I bought the car for 8 grand, right? And all told, I'm probably in it close to $25,000.
Yeah.
Um, and I just keep buying parts for it, right? But
Yeah.
a lot of the things that were wrong with it are things that I upgraded because of what I wanted out of a vehicle.
Mm.
So it wasn't ideal, but it wasn't necessarily an issue. Like if we had to put a new steering rack in your van, that would have been terrible, you
Yeah.
know? But I just put a quicker steering rack in the Outback. Actually, I wish I'd put an even quicker one in because I'm going to be potentially deleting the electronic skid protection, and things like that. The things that I'm doing to it almost don't count anymore.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to lower it 5 inches. I have $500 worth of aluminum skid protection on the bottom of it. Like it doesn't, like it would have been a terrible car had I not had my parents give me 12 grand for it,
Yeah.
you know. So, but that also, I'm glad it happened because we wouldn't necessarily be doing the car stuff that we're doing now, without that,
Yeah,
because that
for
allowed
sure.
me to buy a ton of tools. It gave me a lot of mechanical experience, and since then I've then bought the BMW, which it was just an absolute shit show, and still is. But I mean, the
Definitely is.
BMW is put together with spare parts, and the reason we can do that is because I got to learn how to do it on my Outback. You know.
Yeah, and you just got that
Uh,
new motor and transmission for it.
yeah, yeah. So I guess I'm trying not to jump too far ahead. So, how do you feel on your van? I know that it's a recent death.
It's sad, but it's a blessing in disguise. I don't have the income that I had when I bought it, so getting rid of the car payment is actually really nice. I ended up buying a Suzuki SX4, which is really funny because my mom had one and I hated it. And now I'm falling in love with it. So my Suzuki SX4, which is, I guess, jumping ahead of where you are with the BMW.
That's okay.
It's
The
a project car.
BMW has only, yeah. So we'll talk about the BMW last.
Yeah. So my SX4 is also kind of with the intention of being a project car. And we've got some crazy ideas already because my mom's Suzuki SX4 still exists with a blown motor. And so there's a chance we're going to body swap because hers is from Florida and mine's from Michigan. And if you've ever looked at a car from Michigan, after a few years, the car doesn't exist anymore because it's all rust. So, but it still has a good motor in it. It still has a decent drivetrain in it. And my mom's sold it to a little friend of hers kid, and he didn't realize you have to put oil in it, and so he blew the motor. So everything else in the car is still in really good shape, except for the motor. So
Yeah.
we might have a entirely good car between the two cars that we have. So
Yeah.
I bought my
And
car fully with the
plan-
intention. I bought my car with fully in the intention that I need it to last me a year. Because in theory, by the end of this year, I should have a real adult job and actually be making some money, and can buy a nicer car, buy what I want. And this will become my rallycross car.
Yeah. Oh, geez, no. I'm not gonna do
So
that. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing is it definitely was a cheap car. It definitely has a good amount of problems with it. It definitely would have been probably a terrible purchase. Oh, I see you're doing oil tank delivery. Would have been a terrible purchase for a lot of people. There's a number of things that I think are probably not there. It needs work, right?
definitely
And we are lucky enough to be able to put forth work into that, right? And that's become a thing that I've really solidly enjoyed doing. That was probably not a thing 10 years ago. But something I learned with the BMW is if you're not, and probably something you'll figure out with the Suzuki if you haven't already figured out working on the BMW, um, when you're working on a car that doesn't have to run, it's a lot more fun. When there's no time constraint, if you hit a point, like I hit a point on the BMW where it was like, oh, we need a new transmission, which to most people would sound like a nightmare. But like, I just parked it. It's been parked for like 6 months, it's 8 months, right? And I just haven't cared, right? Like we'll fix it when we fix it, and when we have the parts, which we have a bunch of them now, and when we have the time. But we're not gonna, like, it doesn't have to run tomorrow. I don't have to take it to work, which makes that way more enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of
but
things to it. You can wait for the good
Yeah.
deals. You don't have to buy the
Yep.
part right now. You don't have to rush the labor.
Yeah.
You can just tinker with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a big thing of it. And it's nice to be in that position. And that was kind of the thing with, so after I fixed, so I got my Outback to Utah. And then I had never done anything more complicated than change a radiator, which is, I mean, it's not really that complicated to change a radiator. So let's some perspective for anyone who might not work on cars. I have a really good friend and she has a Corolla, and she's never worked on cars really. I know that she's like not incompetent, right? So I don't want her to feel like if I'm throwing her under the bus if she ever listens to this. I know she knows how to do things like an oil change, and she understands the basics, and she's not an idiot, honestly. Is part of what it comes down to. But she got a check engine light on her car, and she needed to put in a new intake manifold gasket, which requires, unbolting a whole bunch of stuff and swapping some things and getting the check engine light sorted. And we just kind of walked through it on the phone. I would say that was probably more complicated than like replacing a radiator is. And she'd never really done stuff like that before. She didn't own tools. We were trying to find someone who owned a socket set for her to borrow so she could do this.
Yeah.
Right. So the most complicated thing I'd ever done was change a radiator, and I decided I was going to pull an engine out of a car. I did it, and it took me 6 months to actually rebuild the Outback, which is an obscene amount of time. After doing that, it was just, I don't know, it was very enjoyable. I had injured myself, so I couldn't go out and ride my bike like I used to, and I couldn't go out and rock climb as easily. So it was kind of a new hobby. And when I finished it in November of 2019, I didn't have that to do anymore, right? Like I didn't have a car to rebuild. So I kind of started looking for something else to mess with. And that's how I ended up finding the BMW. Because I still had the Civic, but it's a Civic. It's never going to be fast and all that sort of stuff, which I've learned that doesn't necessarily matter. But I figured that the Civic needed $700 to $800 worth of parts. And I was just looking around to see what I could find, and I wanted something rear-wheel drive, and I wanted something with a manual. And I ended up seeing a BMW. I was just looking through KSL in Utah is like Craigslist. So I was looking through effectively Craigslist and had just filtered out all the cars to manuals for $3,000 or less. And I saw this BMW, a 1991 BMW 3 Series, which is an E30, which is the really cool 80s looking ones with the round headlights. And I was like, all right,
in very
I got
similar ways.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, all right, well, I've got $2,000 sitting around, which I didn't. I had $2,000 for a deposit for a house, for like a rental house. But that $2,000 was supposed to cover me and my two roommates, and I was like, all right, well, they can get fucked. I want a car. And so I went and looked at this car for $2,700, and it was in rough shape. And I did the whole like used car buying thing, and I talked them down to $2,000. And so I bought this car for $2,000, and I put it on a trailer. I put it on a trailer, a tow dolly, behind my Outback, and I towed it about 45 minutes to get it home. And then I just did the typical like I used car things, right? I put in new timing belt, water pump. I just started doing the basic maintenance on it
Mhm.
and got it running. And spent I don't know, spent probably 2 months just kind of like messing with it here and there. I had to get a bunch of parts shipped over from Denmark, so that was not enjoyable. Um, and I was still in that same financial situation that I had been in with the Outback. So like ordering a $300 water pump from Germany was like, yeah, whatever, we'll just buy it.
Yeah.
And so like I messed with that for a while, and then we raced it for the first time in like what, May?
Yeah,
Um,
because what really started a lot of this, we went to Florida for Christmas of 2018. We both,
yeah,
we kind of had fallen out of friendship, and then we came back, and our first big hurrah was like, fuck it, we're driving to Florida. Because I was like, hey, I'm thinking about driving to Florida, and he's like, hey, I'm thinking about driving to Florida. So we were like, let's just drive to Florida together. So on that
and we
trip,
did.
on that trip, you started talking about doing rally, and you're like, I want to do rally, and I was like, no,
Yeah,
man, that's too expensive. And then we started really talking about it, and we both have ridden
yeah,
mountain bikes, we've raced bikes a little bit, and it's like racing rally is about the same cost as buying a high-end mountain bike. This doesn't sound so ridiculous anymore. To
yeah. Well,
the average person,
and
a $10,000
to
mountain bike is probably ridiculous. But that's a common
yeah,
thing in our world.
yeah, absolutely. And when I was looking at it, to clarify, rally cross, not stage rally, not big WRC stuff, which we do plan on doing. Actually, that's one of the end goals for the BMW. Um, but I've got two $4,000 bikes hanging on my wall because a $4,000 bike to me is an appropriate level for my skill level. Right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
just not everyone needs a $4,000 bike, but you and I have been riding bikes for 20 plus years, and
Yep.
we're very good cyclists. And there are certain things about my $4,000 bike that I think are a benefit to me, like the $700, maybe it's an $1,100 rear wheel. I don't know. We also worked in bike shops, so it's a little bit different, right? I didn't pay $4,000 for any of my bikes.
Yes.
Um, I'm like, but granted, I'm still more into my bike than most people want to spend. So
Cool.
I started looking at Rally Cross, which is smaller events. Um, and I was seeing people who were buying $500 cars, and they would get them running. They'd put a battery in it or a water pump or, whatever it needed. And they would just beat the piss out of it for like 6 months, and then they would scrap it and buy a new one. And I was like, man, I just pulled the engine out of this car, I can do that. And that's kind of what led to those talks. Was it's like, well, this doesn't seem that hard. And I mean, you've done, how many races have you done? Because I've only done one.
Three now, two in the BMW and one in my van.
Yeah, and you didn't break your van.
I didn't break my van.
uh
We only broke the parts of the BMW that were pretty much broken already, except for the
yeah,
one suspension piece.
which I'm pretty certain was not necessarily properly installed. Um,
Yeah.
or it was just an old piece, but I mean, it is how old is it? 30? Wait, how old am I? It's like a 30-year-old car, right? So, like, the fact that a 30-year-old piece might have stripped a thread is not super surprising.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that I think we've been relatively successful. I'm just
Sure.
dumb and keep buying weird things for the BMW instead of, actually sitting down and fixing it. Um, which includes, I mean, like I said, it's junkyard parts, right? So the plans for the BMW, the actual project car, that I mean, in my head, we basically just share.
Yeah.
Because you've put money into it, right? You've
Oh yeah.
definitely bought parts for it, and you've put a good amount of labor into it. Um, and you've raced it more than I have on top of that. But the plan for the BMW is to make it a full stage rally car, which means 100 miles an hour down weird dirt back roads, taking jumps that send you 30 foot long. I would say. They're not very tall. I guess the biggest jumps that I've seen are like maybe 6-8 feet in the air. But I mean, this is like really hard on cars.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of speed. So we when I got the car, I replaced all of the wear parts, and then I replaced all of the suspension. And then I bought a limited slip rear differential for like $100, like really cheap, off of a parts car. We don't know the condition of it yet, things like that. And then the transmission blew up, and I got a transmission for really cheap from a different car, and we were going to swap the internals. That sounded kind of hard. So then, just the other day, like 2 weeks
Yeah. This was
ago,
like 2 weeks ago.
one of the big swaps, engine swaps that people do in that series BMW is put the engine from the next version of the BMW into it. And I found a engine of very questionable health, with a transmission attached, which would bolt up to our existing engine. Ooh, new object. Oh, that's you. You keep discovering stuff, and I'm like, just traipsing through the mud back here. You know what? I think I'm going to recover to the garage. I'm going through all this mud, but I don't have mud tires on.
Mm. Gotcha.
That explains everything. So we got the transmission and got the engine. It was like $400 for all this stuff. I shoved it into the back of the Outback, which was also a terrible idea. But I somehow managed. I didn't. The guy with his forklift that I was buying the engine from somehow managed to shove it in the back of my Outback, where it lived for about a week, and I pulled all of the small parts off of it, and then it's stuffed in my friend's shop now.
Yeah.
But so the plan is to swap to that engine, which will double the horsepower in it. We'll have the limited slip rear diff, which will allow us to put more power down to it. We've got almost 3 full sets of wheels, multiple tires, just all sorts of stuff, right? We've got different. I've got gauges to install into it. The entire interior's been stripped out. We've got different seats for it. So I mean, it's a project of projects, but once it gets there, it'll be real cool.
Yeah.
I think that's what
I'm
everyone
looking
says about
forward
their
to it.
project cars,
I feel like we're motivated enough to actually do it, though. A lot
Well,
of people get these project cars and they just stop.
I think in defense of people with project cars, I have a bunch of advantages. I'm not married. I don't have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like, there's at no point will I have to be like, oh man, we don't have a place to store this car. Johnny's turning 16 next year. Maybe we should just sell the project car. Like, no, screw that. I keep the project car sitting at my apartment complex, and no one seems to bother me about it, which is great. And I work on it in the parking lot, which once again, for some reason, no one bothers me about, which is great. So I don't foresee me having to get rid of it for the sort of reason that a lot of people have to get rid of their cars.
For sure.
Let's go over the pipeline.
One car we did forget to talk about that I bought. The Maxima. For $75.
Oh yeah, that was the second project car.
That was
I'll let you talk
original
about that.
second project car. We really had our hopes up about doing Lemons races. we had a couple people on board to join us that were going to help us weld up the cage and all this stuff. Put some money
So
into
hold
it.
on. I don't think people outside of the shitbox race car community know what a Lemons race is.
Yeah, so Lemons, 24 Hour of Lemons is a play on the 24 Hour of Le Mans, but also the fact that bad cars are called lemons. And that's the most important part to remember. In this form of racing, you're only allowed to spend $500 on everything that's not safety related. And so what that means is motor, turbo, any kind of upgrades, anything like that.
Suspension.
Yeah, suspension.
Yeah, everything.
Basically
what you're
brakes,
allowed
tires,
to buy is
cage,
brakes.
tire.
Yep.
And so we've been like searching kind of for a Lemons car. And one night I was bored and I was on Craigslist and I found this guy who had a Maxima listed for like $200. And he was like, it works, but it doesn't always start and the battery has a leak, but like last time it ran really nice. So I was like, huh. I was like, hey man, what's the lowest you could go? Because this is why we're trying to buy the car. We're trying to buy the car to race it, and we need to spend as little money as possible. And so, like, I understand if you don't want to go as low as we want to go. So he was like, you know what? I'll do $100. And so I went to the town over. It was about 20 minutes away, and I test drove it, and I was able to drive it most of the way around a block. And the motor sounded great, and the transmission shifted good, but definitely something was wrong with the electrical because it didn't make it all the way around the block. Also, the kid decided to run it out of fuel before we got there because he turned it on to like get the alternator to charge the... Oh, that was it. You had to hot start it. The key didn't work. You had to hot start it by jumping the starter with the battery with a piece of cord. It was a shit show, to say the least.
Yeah.
But it didn't work, but it worked. So we talked him into $75 because he also didn't have the title. And we were like, well, like, we can't, no one will be able to drive this. No one will buy this. The scrap yards won't even come get it and pay you. Like, they'll take it for free, but they won't pay you for it.
Yeah, because they can't scrap it without a title.
Yeah. And so I was like, $75. And the kid was like, you know what? I just need it gone. I'm moving. Like, sure, $75. So we bought a Nissan Maxima for $75 that with probably about an hour of work we could have gotten running properly.
Yeah.
And
yeah, and we just sorry,
we
go
had
ahead.
to move, so
Yeah.
we pushed it out on the curb because it wasn't titled in my name. It's not registered in my name. There's nothing about it that is attached to me. And honestly, the way Heber City police are, it's probably still sitting on the curb out there.
Yeah, well, the hard thing with not having a title, right, is that we couldn't sell it. So you don't need a title to race, right? Because it doesn't have to be a street legal car.
Mhm.
And it's really hard to have a race car be street legal anyway. But you don't need a title to race. There's not really a lot of Lemons cars don't have titles. It seems like from what I can see in the community.
Yeah.
But we couldn't sell it and we couldn't scrap it for the same reasons that the person we bought it from couldn't. And so basically the hope was just that it would get impounded, because at least eventually after a while in the impound, I believe there are like legal recourse for the city to take possession of it and then scrap it. No.
Correct.
But they weren't things that we were able to necessarily do.
Correct.
You know.
Why haven't you got
and
this watchtower in the middle?
that's where I'm heading,
Okay, cool.
I think. Am I?
I hope so.
Yes, that's where I'm heading. I was on a road and I'm like, I'm just gonna go down this road for a while. And we never really got it running, but a lot of that was because we were trying to get the BMW ready for races, and then
Yeah, we got
we
that
kept trying to
right
do
before
stuff
our
on the
first
BMW.
rallycross.
Yep. Yeah, and after the first rallycross happened, and the second rallycross on the way there, so the transmission made this terrible noise in every gear but fourth, and then on the way to the rallycross, I was getting on the highway, and all of a sudden the transmission stopped making the terrible noise, which was really convenient because it's really loud in the car without any interior in it. And then so I was like, all right, well, that's probably something terrible. And then I drove 40 miles, and we got to the rallycross. But when I got to the venue for the rallycross, there was smoke coming out of the transmission and into the center of the car, and I was concerned that could be dangerous. So we didn't race it, and then between then and the next rallycross, we drained the transmission oil, tried to get all the scrap pieces of metal out of there, and then we just raced it again because
all you need is
why
first and
not?
second in rallycross.
Yeah, it turns out well, it didn't make it any worse, but that's only a method that's going to last so long because I have since figured out what's wrong with it, which is why we have gotten a new transmission.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Maxima would have been cool. Yeah, and it's a big jump from, like, I wasn't the kid who grew up with car posters on his wall, right? Like,
No,
I didn't
same.
really have. Did you have a favorite car growing up? Like,
No.
But I wasn't like way into it.
You were into the
Yeah.
Corvette Stingray.
Yeah, I
that's
didn't-
all I remember. But
Yep,
yeah,
and I still kind of want one.
I never really had a car that was like, this is the car that I want when I grow up, or this is the car I want for my 16th birthday. I kind of wanted a Firebird, a Pontiac Firebird, but that was about it.
They're cool.
They're all right.
And
I feel like the
never.
more I get into cars, the less cool they are.
Yeah. No, well, and that was the thing with the Stingray. The Stingrays are not very good, apparently. But I didn't like it. I wasn't one of those, like, I knew kids that knew the, like, 0 to 60 times of the McLaren P1 or whatever was a big car when we were young, right? I didn't play car racing games, right? Like, you had Gran Turismo. I played a little bit of that, but, like, I didn't do that. And now almost all I do is cars, right? Like, I mean, we're playing a truck game, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah. Which is really funny because I still really don't care that much about cars. Like, I like the idea of projects. I like the idea of ridiculous cars. Like, we had these grand plans to put a Toyota MR2 engine in the back of the Scion to make it a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car, just because it was absolutely ridiculous. And
also
that's the
because,
kind of stuff
like,
about
in
cars that I
theory,
like.
it sounds really easy. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's why we have the cars that we have, right? Like, I mean, the BMW E30 is kind of a classic, but I just wanted a light rear-wheel drive sports car. Like, it could have been a Miata, but you can't stage rally a Miata. That's the issue. It's got to have a factory hardtop, or else there's a really good chance I would have had a Miata instead.
Yeah.
Especially the more I learn about Miatas. Because, like I said, I didn't grow up knowing about cars. So the Miata was amazing and everything. I grew up in the South, and we're super sexist, and the Miata is a woman's car, which doesn't make any sense.
Honestly.
Oh no, I've moved past that. The Miata is way too cool to be like, oh, you're a sissy if you drive one of those. No, that thing is so awesome. It's one of the coolest cars on the market, I think. Especially because,
Michael
like,
Schumacher drove one.
Yeah. Well, and, like, it didn't die, right? Like, the Mustang 5.0 doesn't exist anymore. It's not. The Mustang isn't even close to what it used to be. The S2000 doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing like the Miata, really, and the Miata just keeps going. So, like, how are you gonna crap on that? That'd be like saying a Porsche 911 is a woman's car. It's like, what? Just don't be stupid. Stop being stupid and sexist.
I mean, really, at the end of the day, the Miata is like one of the most versatile sports cars for sure. You know, it wins
Yeah.
rallycross titles. There's a ton of people that street race it. You know, legal street racing,
Yeah.
like track racing. You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Well,
the
there's
Miata is
there's
a cool
turbo
car.
kit, there's engine swaps, there's suspension upgrades. You can lift it, you can lower it, you can do so much with it, um, and almost to the point where they're kind of hard to get now. You know, I think there's a lot of people like you and me who have started getting more into cars. You know, we're in our early 30s. Which means we're just getting closer and closer to the age where our generation can really afford toys.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Um, and I think that's why the BMW E30 and the BMW E36 and a lot of these cars are starting to get pretty hard to find. At least cheaply. The joke used to be that you could get a Miata for like $1,000, and then just like throw a turbo on it.
Yeah. That's not
So.
really the case anymore.
No, yeah, and that's the same thing with the E30. When I look up stuff for the BMW, there's a lot of things that's like, oh yeah, just do this. It's super cheap and easy. All the parts are available in the junkyard, but that's just not the case anymore.
Well, there's
that's
actually
okay.
a Lemons video from the 24 Hours of Lemons guys. That's like, did Lemons Racing kill the E30 used market? Because so many people were buying E30s for so cheap to race in Lemons.
Yeah. Well, they were all over. Yeah. Yeah, and part of the reason I even bought mine is because I had assumed that there was no chance of finding one that I could afford. And then when I found one that I could afford that wasn't rusted, I just jumped on it, That was a big part of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty succinct history of how we became car guys, basically. Because, I mean...
Yeah, it's really hard to see myself as a car guy, but really, at the end of the day, I am.
Yeah.
I bought a car to be a project car.
Yeah. Well, and I'm now technically a professional car photographer. I mean, I paid for a business and everything. But that's how much of a car guy I've become, is that's half of what I've set up my life around is like starting photography for, I'm going to drown the car. Nope, don't. No, I just want the upgrade. I just want the upgrade. Yeah. What truck is it for? Oh, the twin steer. I got a better engine.
Oh, nice.
Did you get that?
Yes, I did.
When I got that? Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, we really are. We're not, I think, the car guys that we grew up with, but we're car guys.
Yeah, no, we're definitely not the like muscle heads, like, oh, you got to get a Nova with the big V8 and all that jazz, like quarter mile, like that's not who we are. We like cars.
And that is who we grew up with.
Yeah, we like cars, but we like cars for practical reasons. Like, I mean, yeah, we're gonna race these cars, but really, at the end of the day, the reason we have these cars is because my Suzuki is a great car for doing DoorDash in.
Yeah.
The van was a great car for doing camping and all that kind of stuff, kind of lifestyle stuff. Same with your Outback. Like, yeah, it's a sports car, but it's also a really practical car.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to go to a rally race next weekend, actually. And I'm going to do photography there, but I'm sleeping in my car while I do it. And it will also be the car that's going to be, on stage doing scouting and all that sort of stuff, because it is very capable. It's absolutely a big part of it.
Yeah. Okay, so to end this podcast, what is one piece of advice you'd give someone looking for either a used car for their next car, whether it be a project car or just a car for fun? Or like a car for daily use.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's different advice there, right? Because I think if I was looking for a car strictly for fun, it would depend on my my willingness to learn, right? Because I don't honestly 2 years ago I didn't know crap about cars, and now we are talking about engine swaps in your Suzuki, right? Which is just like on a different level. So if you're willing to learn that, find the lightest car, like take Lotus's approach. Make it, or what is it? Make it faster and add lightness. That was like their whole thing, is adding lightness. You want lighter. I think that lighter is better, is the camp that I'm currently in. And then if you're looking for, a daily driver, man, I think that people get too caught up in being pretentious, myself included, right? Like my Civic and your Scion, they didn't have heated seats. My Civic didn't have ABS. They didn't have nice radios, but all of that sort of stuff was so easy to add into. And you got to think like a base level Corolla right now looks, I think, really great. All new cars have backup cameras. They all have good radios and things like that. Like, get something that is going to be reliable, and I would say get something used, because a 2007 Civic is probably going to last you so long that you can get to a situation where you can be in a financial situation where you can buy a dumb car. Where if I had had an Integra that blew up when I was halfway through college, I would definitely I wouldn't have cars that I enjoy now, because I'd still probably be drowning in car payments from when I had to have a car,
Yep.
I think that was a big part of it. And that's something that you kind of just ran into, is that life changes sometimes and you can't always predict what's going to happen. And you were in a way lucky that you now don't have a car payment. Where I knew people at the bike shop that had car payments as much as my rent, because they needed to have an SUV and their car blew up and they didn't have a choice, right? So like having that reliable Civic, even though it's crappy, means that you can wait until you're ready,
Yeah, until you're ready, you find the right deal, whatever it is.
Yeah, finding the right deal is absolutely a big thing. Like that, the engine and transmission that I bought for the BMW, I paid $400 for, and they go for $1,500.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any last words on your car journey?
Not unless we want to get into a diatribe of me rambling about random crap that half the people won't understand.
No, that's fine. Well, if you guys want to know anything more about our car history or what we've done with our cars or resources that we enjoy, hit us up on Facebook at Axle Deep. We're also on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for tuning in to the Axle Deep podcast, where we went Axle Deep on cars and our car history. Again, my name is Alex and my co-host is Derek. Have a nice day.